Buongiorno amici! Everyone wants to optimize health, but nobody knows how to define it. Is health simply absence of disease? Can we use the latest science to measure health at the molecular level? And how can we translate this into clinical practice? Dr. Ted Achacoso will address these topics in a knowledge-dense lecture. I suggest you pause the video whenever you encounter a new concept to get the most out of this lecture. I will put all the links mentioned in the lecture in the description box below this video. I am Dr. Lucia Aronica and I am on a mission to make the science I teach in the classroom accessible to everybody. If you want to support this mission, please consider subscribing to my YouTube channel and hit the notification bell to get notified when I post a new video. So, let's jump into it. Welcome to another lecture of Diet and Gene Expression at Stanford Continuing Studies. I am Dr. Lucia Aronica, and today our special guest is Dr. Ted Achacoso. Dr. Ted has been described as genius doctor, legendary wellness biohacker, and the smartest physician on the planet. He entered college at the age of 15. He trained, researched, or founded companies in anti-aging and nutritional medicine, neurology, chronobiology, medicinal plants, artificial intelligence, consciousness, and more. Dr. Ted's current mission revolves around a new healthcare paradigm called HOME, Health Optimization Medicine. Dr. Ted has been featured on Forbes, CNN, and major news magazines and TV shows around the world. He is chronologically 59, telomerically 32, and epigenetically 22.5. Ted, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for having me, Lucia.
It's
a pleasure to be here.
I'm really thrilled to have you. To me, you are a contemporary Leonardo da Vinci. We met a couple of years ago, and I had the privilege to deliver a talk on epigenetics for your network of physicians in Manila, and to design the epigenetics module of your home CME certification program. And having you for this last lecture of this course is just the icing on the cake, because you are bringing together many topics that we cover in this course: epigenetics, genetics, and their integration with metabolomics and other omics markers in a coherent system that help people not only just not getting sick, but actually being healthy. So I'm very, very happy to have you. Before diving into the details of HOME, could you introduce yourself and briefly describe what HOME is?
Yes, they said that Westerners describe themselves by what they do, and Easterners describe themselves by how they relate to the world. So I'm not going to do either. I'm going to just describe myself as someone who actually likes to take a look at different perspectives on things, kind of like, you know, the poem by John Godfrey Sachs, The Blind Man and the Elephant. You know, sometimes you're seeing something as a wall, you know, sometimes you see something as a snake, sometimes you see something as a trunk, you know, and pretty soon you find that you're actually dealing with an elephant. And that's what the power of perspective does. The other thing that I like to do really is identifying what's common or what gets fractalized or what gets repeated in a particular something. And for example, you could see that, you know, in the markets, in the capitalist markets, like, you know, you have greed and fear, right? And that's also happening in medicine, in home hope, for example. It's a response to this because we all fear getting sick, right? We all fear disease. But there is no counterpart to it, which is the joy of health. So I'm over at the other side, which is, discovering the joy of health and making it the foundation for everything. And having a disease, it just occurs much later or not at all if you're able to take care of yourself and by being joyful in the way you take care of yourself. So health optimization medicine and practice exactly that. We are taught in medical school how diseases happen. We're taught to give drugs. We're taught how to do surgery, but we're never taught what's a healthy person. You know, how do we fuck up a health person because we don't know what we're fucking up in the first place. So that's the whole concept here, is that we need to know what's the baseline of health before we can even repair something, right?
Yes, and you have been a pioneer in that. Even the Baseline project which was launched a couple of years ago by
Yes.
Google and Stanford, has this goal to define what health is. But you have actually started your home paradigm more than 10 years ago,
Yes,
right?
yes. Uh, I was getting very impatient. We have to move the needle very quickly now because a disease-oriented medicine is very, very expensive and unaffordable, really unaffordable to many of us.
No, I'm very, very thrilled to have you. And just a quick question, how home is different from, for example, functional medicine or preventative medicine or evidence-based medicine?
Sure. Home hope is different from functional medicine because functional medicine is after the root causes of disease, right? So that's pathogenesis. Whereafter the root causes of health or salutogenesis, right? So we go in opposite directions. Also, home hope does what's called metabolic neotenization, meaning we want to make your metabolic profile younger, right? The other thing that we do is we're not preventive medicine, really, because preventive medicine is prevention of certain diseases, right? So, for example, if I have a patient who has diabetes, heart disease, and a stroke, right? They give three different preventive protocols. Like, this is how you prevent stroke, this is how you prevent heart attacks, and this is how you prevent progression of diabetes, which is really awful, right? But what about a protocol for just being able to optimize your health? There's none, right? So we're not preventive medicine at all. So the question is, are you evidence-based medicine? This is a very common question to me. Evidence-based medicine is really evidence-based illness medicine, right? Because evidence must be available for your antibiotic to work in the population, for your surgical technique to work in the population. But when you're working with an individual, it's about the quality of life, right? It's not about the quantity of life, but the quality of life. So we're not about longevity. We're about the quality of life. We're not about health lifespan. We're really all about health span. So that, in summary, is the difference among those.
Thank you very much. Dr. Ted, I think, although you say you're not about longevity, I think you are about longevity 2.0, which is healthy longevity. It's actually a name that is used to describe what you just said, is health span. Yeah. And lifespan is extending lifespan through enhancing health span, isn't it? And and you have pioneered even the longevity field is taking traction, and there is this there is a mission to target aging as a root cause of diseases, and it's a little bit what you just described. So you are just actually targeting health as the root cause,
I agree with you and I disagree with you, because I may be totally healthy and then a bus hits me tomorrow and there goes my longevity, right? So we should be prepared for such contingencies.
Definitions are not important. I just want to point that probably, many of the longevity enthusiasts out there
Yes.
should also be interested in your model, because I think actually there is a lot in common. I do teach a class on logging for longevity, and I would love to have you as a guest there exactly for this reason, because I think that in your model, there is actually a lot of similarity to this healthy longevity paradigm. But anyway, without further ado, I know you have prepared some slides to share. So
yes, and it is a good summary for your course, because I'm also a professor, so I know how to goad students to use mnemonic devices, right?
I know
To
you
remember
are.
something. So I think they're gonna have fun with this one.
Yeah,
So
and
let
actually
me
we
just share
didn't
my
go through
screen.
your academic credentials, otherwise this will take a podcast by itself.
Yeah, let me just do this. All right.
Yes, perfect.
Okay. All right. Just as a disclosure, I have received no commercial financial support for this lecture. This is our logo. It was designed by myself and a wonderful Slovenian artist, Thea Krasek. And we were just featured in Tanjang Mathematical Magazine in Paris this year. It's a butterfly, the flapping of a butterfly's wings, creating a hurricane. And we hope the Home Hope model actually does this in terms of healthcare. So we are a U.S. nonprofit tax-exempt organization, and our main mission is to educate physicians in health optimization medicine or home, and non-physician healthcare practitioners in health optimization practice or HOPE on the clinical framework of health optimization medicine and practice. So this is our mnemonic for this short lecture. I'll discuss it's a 3373 mnemonic, the 3 scales of evolutionary perspective, the 3 principles that each require a shift in frame of reference, the 7 pillars of Home Hope as a multi-omics clinical specialty, and the 3 elements of Home Hope that define and deliver the standard of care in health, not disease. Because remember, we have lots of standards of care for disease, but we don't have a single standard of care for health. So Home Hope uses 3 scales of evolutionary perspective in clinical practice. I shall discuss the XYZ one by one. And here we are. The x-axis is the evolution adaptation scale, right? And we scale backwards because where we practice illness medicine is at the modern man. Where we practice health optimization medicine is at the Paleolithic man, right at hunter-gatherer, and before agriculture and animal husbandry. We all know that agriculture and animal husbandry are the 2 watershed events that changed our health forever and changed the lifestyle of the hunter-gatherer. So this is where you could think about, well, will a paleo diet work, right? For example, is a high sugar diet actually good for us? And if you look at this, you will find your answers here. And of course, in the single-celled organisms is where we look for what's called master regulatory genes and epigenetic pathways that control our genes. An example of this would be vitamin D. For example, vitamin D has been produced by phytoplankton and zooplankton for over 500 million years. And we also have conserved our genes for the vitamin D receptor for over 500 million years. In fact, the estimate is about 750 million years. And the vitamin D receptor, once with the vitamin D, once it binds with the vitamin D receptor element, will activate or modulate the activity of about over 2,000 genes. In illness medicine, it's actually interesting that they already know the association of vitamin D with diabetes, insulin resistance, and all of that. However, this is what they do, right? What's the right level of vitamin D? They still argue what's the right level of vitamin D. Is it 12.5? Is it 40 to 60? But we in health optimization medicine and practice go back to the Paleolithic man in the Maasai and Hadzabe tribes of Africa, where chronic diseases are rare or non-existent, and we find that their vitamin D levels are at the level of 50 to 100 nanograms per ml. So this is the second axis, the size complexity scale. This is self-explanatory. You have the organism, organ systems, organs, tissue, cells, organelle, molecules, atoms, and so the subatomic level. So here we scale back from organs because organs is where we practice illness medicine, and cellular biochemistry is where we practice self-optimization medicine. It's where we bring medicine home. So cellular biochemistry, we include bacteria and the symbionts like mitochondria. Mitochondria are actually bacteria inside our cells. Exosymbionts are those that live outside our cells, like our gut microbiota, right? And so here we go, taking a look at this axis, and see organs are made up of specialized cells. Like, for example, the brain is made up of neurons, and then all of these specialized cells are made up of the basic cell. So are there tests for organ, specialized cell, and basic cell functions? For organs, yes. Everyone knows that there are liver function tests, for example, and you could test for the various different things that the liver produces. And then we could also test for the specialized cell. For example, the beta cells of the pancreas are the ones that produce insulin, right? And you could test the indirect effect of indirectly via its effect on fasting blood sugar. But what about the test for basic cell? Yes, this is newly available. It's been available for a decade now. That's still relatively new in the life cycle of medicine. And it basically tests the status of your nucleus, your cell membranes, your mitochondria, your cytoplasm, and all the other organelles. And they're nice enough to place the results in the biochemical pathways because this is how we understand them. I shall show you samples of the test results later as we go on. So since the basic cell is common to all the specialized cells of all organs, Home Hope practices at the foundational level. So we practice at the universal common denominator of health. So the next axis is the environment chronobiology scale. Here you could see the invention of the light bulb, for example, the start of the production of electricity. And we proceed here from the post-industrial era to the pre-industrial world. So where we practice illness medicine is now. So the pre-industrial world is where we practice health optimization medicine. How? Well, we do a lot of cheating, right? We cheat by technology. For example, we now have air purifiers to purify the polluted air in our homes. So in illness medicine, they immediately look at the association of the pollution to disease, for example, electromagnetic hypersensitivity and diabetes and multiple sclerosis. But for us in health optimization medicine, we really only look at how, for example, electromagnetic fields can stress living cells, or how disturbances in the immune system can be caused by electromagnetic fields. They are not diseases in themselves, but they show stress. As you can see here, we have oxidative stress markers that can now be measured, right? And this patient or this client, I call them clients because they're not sick, has peroxidation of his lipids, a mild peroxidation of lipids. So there's some mild oxidative stress. And of course, your vitamin D is very good for managing your oxidative stress. And you could see here that this client is also vitamin D deficient. So let's go to the second. So if that's the first three, now we go to the second three. We shift in frame of reference in three principles. So pathogenesis shifts to salutogenesis, geriatrization shifts to neopenization, and organology shifts to holobiontology. Let's take this one by one. So pathogenesis is really the origins of disease, and salutogenesis is the origins of health. So the start point in pathogenesis is the disease or a problem, and the start point in salutogenesis is the health or potential. And therefore, we are reactive when we deal with pathogenesis because we simply treat disease, right? But in salutogenesis, we are proactive because we generate better health. The end point of pathogenesis will be minimize problems, whereas optimized potential implies a continuing progress, right? So this was by Craig Becker. I took a snapshot of his video on YouTube. He wrote these two papers, Salutogenesis 30 years later, where do we go from here? And it's time to make the profession of health about health. Don't worry about this stuff. Everything, I promise, Lucia, that this will be mailed to you in your handouts. So let's go to the second shift in frame of reference, which is geriatricization to neotenization, right? And when you were young, you were cute. And as you got older, you were no longer cute. So we can see this in the evolution of Mickey Mouse, when Mickey Mouse first came out in the late 20s, right? I think 1928. If you look at the silver card here, he came out as an adult mouse, right? But over the years, they juvenilized him and made him younger. How? By making his head bigger in proportion to his body. He has large eyes, a button nose, and a receding chin, right? And that's why Queen Victoria was considered to have a baby face, because she had large eyes, button nose, and a receding chin. This is from the famous essay of Stephen Jay Gould on the evolution of Mickey Mouse and the introduction of neotenization, right? But we're not going to make you the curious case of Benjamin Button. You know, we are talking here about metabolic neotenization. This home hope makes younger, right, your metabolite levels to those found at ages 21 to 30, or to those evolutionarily derived values, like for vitamin D, right? And the observed consequence here is when you do this, when you shift, when you make younger the metabolite levels to between 21 and 30 years old, there comes epigenetic neotenization, telomeric neotenization, and the euthanizing of other clocks that determine biological age versus chronological age. Too bad, you know, we can't use the term euthanasia for this. So the third perspective is organology to holobiontology. So what are holobionts? They're assemblages of different species that form ecological units, right? So here, illness medicine deals with individuals in a population. A population is within a community in an ecosystem. So and so you could see here how illness medicine looks at an individual in a population, but health optimization medicine is really deals with populations of organisms or cells within an individual. In other words, in health optimization medicine, the individual itself is the ecosystem. So we're not just biohackers, we're holobiont hackers, right? So what exactly does holobiont perspective give us, right? It forces us to do several things. It forces us to acknowledge the history of our cells. Like once upon a time, you know, our cells were actually in a symbiotic relationship of two organisms, an anaerobic organism and an aerobic organism. And the aerobic organism became the mitochondria, right? So our current cells, except for our red blood cells, are actually two organisms, the anaerobic organism and the aerobic organism, which went into symbiotic relationship in evolution. Now, there's, of course, we are forced to consider the gut microbiota as a postnatal organ, meaning as an organ that grows after birth, right? And it grows until we're about 3 years old. And at 3 years old, the composition is that of an adult. I didn't say the weight or the population, but the composition is that of an adult. So it forces us to consider this not as other to the human body, but part of us, right? And what's the other thing that it forces us to do? It forces us to consider all of the specialized cells, you know, the liver cells, the white blood cells, the fat cells, etc. All of these are different organisms that are actually producing molecules such as hormones and cytokines in the body, right? So this is easy now to understand. You know, how do we shift the frame of reference from disease diagnosis to health detection? What's missing in illness medicine? So this is classic medical school, right? You go to study anatomy, physiology, and when you go down to molecular levels, you study molecular biology, and then you jump to pathology, right? And then you're taught how to treat with drugs, you're taught how to do surgery, or you do minimally invasive combinational procedures, as I did. You know, I'm a minimally invasive interventional neuroradiologist. So what's missing here? So here you go. If you have a pathology, of course, you can make a diagnosis, and your treatment will be drugs or surgery, right? But what's missing here will be saluneoteno-holobiontology, but that's a mouthful. So we'll just use the term health optimization. So health optimization allows us to detect and correct imbalances at the inter and intracellular network level common to all organs, right? So whereas illness medicine allows us to do diagnosis and treatment of disease at the organ level. So we now go to the 7. As I said, this is easy, 337, right? Home Hope translates 7 multi-omic sciences into clinical practice. So we'll go through this one by one by providing examples, right? And we'll do, this is the overarching diagram. Again, this will be provided in your handout. So in illness medicine, essentially, we have what we do here is that we look for disease markers. For example, we look for HbA1c or fasting blood sugar irregularities, right? And when hunting for a disease, right? But the story is actually more complicated than that. It turns out that there are 4 gears: genes, symbiotic partners, environment, and time, that actually are at work here before the disease markers even happen. So genes via the nuclear DNA, mitochondrial DNA, and nucleic acids; symbiotic partners via the mitochondria and gut microbiota; environment via direct and indirect signals; and time via circadian time or evolutionary time. They all throw out what's called metabolites. These are small molecule intermediates. You can then detect them, these metabolic markers, and we could detect early onset of metabolic deregulations, and you could do health management. So that's how health optimization medicine and practice works. We detect and correct imbalances. So if you want to detect a imbalance, you use metabolomics. If you want to correct an imbalance, you use metabolomics. If you want to affect the genetics, then you use the science of epigenetics. If you want to affect the symbiotic partners, then they use the sciences of bioenergetics and the gut immune system. If you want to use to affect the environment, then we use the science called exposomics. This is usually deals with toxins. And you have if you want to affect time, then you use the sciences of evolutionary medicine and chronobiology. So these are the 7 pillars of health optimization medicine and practice. Easy, right? So we just do a clinical translation of that. This is where I modify the figure from. And here, I just want you to focus on the pyramid. As I said, the metabolites are simply the intermediates, products of metabolism. So as you go away from the genome, as you move up in the pyramid, you see that you can see the physiological and environmental influence. An easy way to remember this is that you could see mercury toxicity in the metabolome, but you cannot see mercury toxicity in the genome, right? So why metabolomics then? Because genomics can tell us what can happen. Transcriptomics can tell us what appears to be happening. Proteomics are what makes it happen. And metabolomics is what has happened and is happening. And therefore, metabolomics is clinically actionable immediately, right? So we have what's called a Home Hope dashboard, right? And it's just like these metabolites are warning lights, right, in a car. And so as we said earlier, in our holobiont model, you have these exogenous metabolites from food, microbes, drugs, plants, toxins, pollutants, and cosmetics, right? And you have your endogenous metabolites from 4 organisms in the human holobiont. As I said, the anaerobic organism, and then the aerobic organism is your mitochondria. The microorganism will be your microbiota. The special organisms will be your special cells producing special molecules like hormones and cytokines. And all of those are throwing out network metabolites that are detectable and quantifiable, right? So for those of you who don't know it, there's actually a human metabolome database. Actually, there are several of them. There's not just a human genome database, guys. So there's one for toxins called P3DB, one for drug metabolites called Drug Bank, and endogenous metabolites in humans, the Human Metabolome Database. So this is a sample of the dashboard. This is an actual patient that I had. As you could see, this is the micronutrient metabolome, and the patient or client needs alpha lipoic acid, vitamins B1, 2, 7, and magnesium. So it is a prospective dashboard. It's like your windshield wiper is fluid is low, right? So you need more alpha lipoic acid. So it's a proactive correction of imbalances. This is an example of a macronutrient metabolome, for example, in fats, right? You could actually take a look at the metabolites of your omega-3 fatty acids, your omega-6 fatty acids, and calculate for the ratio. And this is what's actually quite annoying right now, because many physicians are pushing people to take more and more um, omega-3 fatty acids, but then they're upsetting the ratio, right? And they're actually putting the patients more at cardiovascular risk because they're taking too much more of omega-3s. Then I find that I have to give patients omega-6 fatty acids like evening primrose oil, or make them eat lots of, sunflower seeds. So take a look at the mitochondrial metabolome here, and you could see here the X is the anaerobic part of the cell, and the O is the oxidate, the one that uses oxygen. And you could see here, these are the metabolites of the citric acid cycle or the Krebs cycle. We can now measure them instead of just memorizing them as, can I keep selling sex for money officer? That's the favorite, that's a favorite mnemonic, right? For the Krebs cycle intermediates. So here's gut microbiome metabolites from stool. And it's known that butyrate, for example, is highly correlated with low levels of butyrate is highly correlated with colon cancer, and they are produced by gut bacteria, right? And they are produced by the fermentation of dietary fiber, and have always said the fastest disappearing macronutrient in the human diet is actually fiber, right? This is more now Lucia's wheelhouse, and the epigenome. Epigenetics are heritable changes in gene function that do not involve changes in DNA sequence. And this is my favorite slide of it all because it brings home the point that a smoking mom would affect her daughter and her daughter's reproductive cells. So that's 3 generations. And one of the major mechanisms that it does this is by DNA methylation, right? By tagging the histones of the DNA. And new test is also available for the consumer now is your methylation clock for epigenetic age. Like, for example, this a client that I had is age 36. She's her epigenetic age is 34, and she's 69% are younger than people in her age, and so this your epigenetic age is compared to general population. I'm sure Lucia knows about methylation clocks better than I do, but we can use this to take a look at what drug therapies are doing to your epigenetic age, for example, and what of our supplemental and dietary and lifestyle prescriptions can do to your epigenetic age. So exposome is actually very simply remembered as your environmental genome. So this is everything in your environment. This is from an actual patient that I had with very high mercury from being a pescatarian, eating lots of fish all the time that contain high mercury. And of course, cadmium has come from the rebar that was used in construction in the 1940s. And they have now leached into our water system, and we are now seeing a lot of cadmium toxicity. For the chronobiome, we know that chronobiology is very related to obesity. And it's only now that we actually are characterizing the human chronobiome, meaning the time-dependent signals in the body. But for those doing acupuncture, they already know this in traditional Chinese medicine, right? You have the time for when the liver is active, or for when the lung is active, or for when the kidney is active or dormant, and so on. So, but we're more practical in health optimization medicine. So we know that sleep deprivation will upregulate your cytokines and C-reactive protein. So you can have your cytokines tested, and you can take a look at the pro-inflammatory and anti-inflammatory balance of the cytokines in the body. Now, so the last here of the 7 would be what's called the CDR metabolome, or the cell danger response metabolome. So evolutionary medicine asks, why do we get sick, right? And health optimization medicine asks, how do we get healthy? So here is the reference for this, metabolic features of the cell danger response. This will also be in your handout. And the key idea here is don't get bothered by the text here. All that this is saying is that whenever a cell is stressed out, by anything, physical, chemical, biological, or even psychological, it can only respond in 8 evolutionary predetermined ways, right? So the picture is like this. So we have acute physical, chemical, biological, psychological threat. There's a cell danger response that promotes inflammation, innate immunity, oxidative stress, and ER response. And then there is healing that happens. That's normal, right? But there's a chronic physical, biological, or psychological threat, and there will be an abnormal persistence, and this is considered to be the beginning of chronic diseases, right? And home hope optimizes the resolution of the cell danger response. Now, Navio, who proposed a different term called salutogenesis instead of salutogenesis by using drugs to actually block the abnormal persistence of the cell danger response. Now, that's just the legend for this. As you can see in the CDR metabolome, you could see here is a balancing of the healthy development or winter maintenance metabolism and the summer growth metabolism. Now, this is actually deceptive because there's summer and winter every day in our bodies. For example, when you are hungry, you are actually in a winter metabolism. And when you're fed, you're actually in a summer growth metabolism. So you could see here, and so when you're in a growth metabolism, you're basically in anabolic mode, right? You're building, and when you're in a maintenance mode, you're actually catabolizing. And this is important for our definition of health later. So you could see here the usual suspect. There's the mitochondria. There's oxidative stress. There's ATP. There's even a consumer test now that where you could test the ATP production of your mitochondria in your white blood cells. And of course, here's vitamin D, there's folate and B12 and S-adenosylmethionine. These are for your methylation pathway, right? And especially important for epigenetics. And here's the other 9 of the metabolic branch points. And see here tryptophan, which is necessary for the synthesis of your serotonin, arachidonic acid, which is responsible for inflammation and pain. Here are the metals. And of course, we discussed the gut microbiome. Now, the importance of metabolomics is that small molecule nutrients and metabolites are the prime movers of the cell danger response. So how do we measure these metabolites is through clinical metabolomics. So illness medicine also needs to learn metabolomics because this article just appeared in December of 2020. Metabolomics is the stethoscope of the 21st century. And here they give their cases for the various specialties, but they are encountering transitional challenges. Why? Because they are looking for patterns of disease in a metabolic network without first knowing the patterns of health, right? And the second is they are used to looking for single disease markers instead of marker patterns in a network. So let's go to the last 3, and this will be very quick. The 3 elements that define and deliver the standard of care in health, not disease. So there's health, optimization, and medicine and practice. So take away this definition for yourselves. Health equals A plus B plus C. So health is the absence of disease and is the purview of illness medicine. And B, the balance between anabolism and catabolism according to the cycle of life of the organism. Remember our summer and winter in the balance before in the cell danger response? Well, here it is. That's where we practice health optimization, medicine, and practice. So what it means is that just because you're not sick doesn't mean that you're healthy. It only means that you're not sick. Now, what I'd like the students to know is really health and fitness are 2 different things. Fitness allows one to handle stress from a baseline state according to the life cycle of an organism, okay? And a simple way to remember this is to ask the question, fit for what? In other words, you may be fit to run a marathon, but you're not healthy, or you may be healthy, but you're not fit to run a marathon, or you may be healthy, but you're not mentally fit to stand trial, right? So home hope. So we go to optimization. We don't use illness medicine range of values. For example, patients sometimes come to me, oh, I have normal thyroid values. It's the recommended daily allowance in your nutrition and the laboratory cutoff values for diseases are survival values and not optimal values. So we neotenize or make younger your metabolic subnetworks to values that it had when you were between 21 and 30 years old, because that's assumed to be the optimal functioning of our metabolic pathways, or we use evolutionarily derived values as the optimal range. So Terry Hertog in Europe actually uses the mean value at age 25, right? In the US, Mark Gordon uses the median value between age 20 to 30, but I use the 50th to 75th percentile at age 21 to 30, or use evolutionarily derived values, for example, for vitamin D. Now, now we go to medicine and practice, the third element. So it's very simple. You measure, you compare, and balance. And how do we do that? So the first, you measure the metabolite levels, especially of the nutrient and hormone networks, right? Then you compare the measurements to the metabolite levels found at age 21 to 30 or at evolutionarily derived values. The optimal range, we don't use standard reference ranges for diseases, right? And then balance, meaning we correct and shift the nutrient and hormone networks using the active form of nutrients and bioidentical hormones towards the optimal range by using ratio correction and network-wide range shifting. So here's how we order the use of balancing agents. Our first line will be, of course, what your body uses, right? The second line will be the plants, the fungi, bacteria, and phages. And it's only in the third line that we actually use drugs, because many of the drugs that we're using have never been encountered by the body in evolution. So here's our short lecture summary. So we have the 3373 with the 3 scales of evolutionary perspective. We have the evolution adaptation scale. We scale back to the Paleolithic man from the modern man. We have the size complexity scale, scale back from the cell to the organ. And we have the environment chronobiology scale. You scale back to pre-industrial world from post-industrial world. Now, the 3 principles that each require a shift in frame of reference, from pathogenesis to cellulogenesis, diretization to neotenization, organology to holobiontology. 7 pillars of home hope, well, you already know that. And the 3 elements of home hope that define and deliver the standard of care in health, not disease, is health equals A plus B plus C. You already know that, right? Optimization between ages 21-30 or evolutionary derived values, and medicine and practice of measuring, comparing, and balancing using ratio correction and network-wide range shifting. Now, this will be in your handout, but I just want you to focus actually on this one, where I place the oval yellow. My goal is actually to get physicians and practitioners to ask 2 questions of themselves or of their students. You know, what's your disease management plan for the patient or the client? And then what's your health optimization plan for the health and clients? Right now, we only are asking for the disease management plan. We're not asking for any health optimization plan, right? So here we are. Health optimization medicine and practice is the first and only multi-omics clinical specialty that defines and delivers a standard of care in health, not disease. If you're interested in us, we have certification modules at homehope.org on the 7 pillars of home hope. There are CME credits ranging from 36 to 45 depending on whether or not you take the finals or not, right? So if you're interested at all, are just curious about these modules, there are a certificate of attendance tracks that you can just take individually, but you can also become a home health practitioner or even just a practitioner in the practice of metabolomics. All right.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow.
See, it's a summary.
Oh my gosh, this was a nutrient-dense talk. I encourage my students and the viewers to watch it again and again to digest all the concepts and assimilate them, because these are really innovative concepts. And as you can see, Dr. Ted has introduced new words in the medical field, because when something doesn't exist, you need to create a word for that. And, you know, I think, Dr. Ted, you remind me of some creative and genius scientists in my network. There is an Italian scientist, Claudio Franceschi. He has introduced the name inflammaging for the first time. And he has he has introduced many other clever words, garbaging. And, this is what happens when you are such, a polyhedric scientist that is bringing together many concepts and to create something new. So that was really lovely.
Thank you. In fact, for the students here, is that when we started writing these modules, I actually just had one question in mind. There's a patient or client in front of me, so what the fuck do I do? What the hell do I do? It's, you can dive into didactics as much as you want, but what is it that you're going to do to that patient or that client that's in front of you? And so the thing that we did was to translate all of this omics into something that's practical, that you could actually use to not only detect and monitor health, but to actually optimize the health.
Yeah, no, and probably we should actually create a new course just out of this lecture, and probably a dictionary and
yes,
and yes, but yeah. But anyway, this was really lovely, and I have helped you create the epigenetics module.
Yes, and
it was
thank you so much.
Yeah, it was fun working with the clinicians to make that module actually approved for CME, so continuing medical education certification. So it's a little different from what I teach in this course. It's really more towards clinical applications, and it was fun. And I also learned a lot during the process about the needs of clinicians when applying epigenetics in their practice. So anyway, I want to go through a couple of questions. First of all, how you became inspired in creating home?
Yes. You actually touched on something. I was lecturing, I got enamored with the mitochondria, over a decade ago, because it energized the body, right? So I said, how do we use my mitochondria for health? And there were studies that were coming out that said, well, 12-hour fast is enough to induce mitochondrial biogenesis. So I was going to lecture this to physicians, and then they wouldn't give me any CME credits because they said that this is a basic science, the doctor should know this. And I really got annoyed. So that was an irritation. This part was, I had many patients who were very young ones who were undergoing anxiety and depression. They were getting treatment-resistant depression. And then there was this whole slew of studies that actually showed that the gut microbiota is related to anxiety, depression, the discovery of the enteric microbiota gut-brain axis, right? Before, when I was in medical school, it was just the gut-brain axis. Now it's like a tripartite axis that we're talking about, right? And then, so that was actually the impetus for me. It's like, how come no one is actually translating these omic sciences into clinical practice? Because what, should we take another 20, 25 years before we can help our patients and clients? I don't think so. I mean, we should do this now, right? So that's what actually spurred me and inspired me. The patients did, the clients did. And of course, an annoyance with the establishment, right?
And then another question, in this course, we also talk about genetics and its crosstalk with epigenetics. So what's the role of genetics, if any?
Yes. Oh, it's very important. For example, the way we look at it in Home Hope is that genetics, we look after what's called the master regulatory genes, or MRGs. And an example of this chia is really the AMPK, the adenosine monophosphate kinase, the and mTOR pathway, right? You know that the AMP, these are very highly conserved. They've been there for millions of years in our system, and we're still using them. Why? Because AMPK is an energy sensor, right? And you know that if you want to activate it, you can take an alpha lipoic acid supplementation, right? And if you want to activate the mTOR system, you can take a leucine amino acid supplementation, because we know that these are what drives this. So that's the relationship of genetics to health optimization medicine. If we look at it from an evolutionary term, what's highly conserved, why are they conserved, and how do we dampen them or modulate or actually increase their activity? with
This is
nutrients.
fascinating, yeah, because all those genes are now becoming actually more and more popular, even in mainstream, because we can actually regulate their activity through fasting or dietary interventions.
And they exist in a balance, right? They exist in balance. You have something that does the catabolism, you have something that does anabolism. So you have to find a good balance. And you know what? You can do it through nutrition, the proper nutrition, proper supplementation, you know, before you even start doing drugs.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Actually, anabolism and catabolism are two opposites, and they are maintaining the balance is so important. And I think one way of summarizing this is the Nietzsche's quote, "What doesn't kill you makes you stronger." So you need to destroy catabolism and then to be able to be truly anabolic, but you don't want to destroy too much or build too much. Anyway. Yeah.
But for me, what doesn't kill me makes me create health optimization medicine and practice.
I love it. And so talking about, you touch on drugs, but so I know that you are also using, there is also like a place for the use of psychedelics, right?
I thought you'd never ask the question.
Of course, this is if people Google you, and you are known as the legendary wellness biohacker, and there are actually some students in my longevity class that wrote projects on psychedelics and the new science also coming on some of these agents. So I want to take your take on that.
Yeah, actually, it's interesting because all the studies are now coming out. At the risk of outing myself, you know, microdosing is actually a little good habit to have. You know, for creativity and taking a look at the bigger picture. But the studies are coming out now that, for example, DMT or dimethyltryptamine, the active component of ayahuasca, right? It actually promotes neurogenesis in the hippocampus, and that, you know, what the hippocampus does is for our memory, right? And the other thing is that the LSD, for example, ketamine and psilocybin, all promote what's called dendritic spinogenesis, meaning that there are more connections that are formed by the dendritic spines. In ketamine, in as early as 6 hours, and in LSD, in about 72 hours. So you could actually add connections to your brain. They raise what's called the brain-derived neurotrophic factor. So it can be used as so the psychedelic can be used for in their proper doses, can be used for brain health optimization.
Yeah, so I've never tried psychedelics myself, but I'm actually interested from a scientific point of view, because for the biology of emotions, right?
Yes.
So I think that's why I'm also reading more and more, also because I'm teaching a class on longevity, which has always a biohacking component to that. So
it's actually not even just the biology in terms of the receptor way, but taking a look at the, you know, for example, the long tracks of the brain and the networks of the brain. We already have an encyclopedia actually made by Stanford, right? And we know that the seat of the ego is actually at the default mode network of the brain. Right? The seat of spirituality is the periaqueductal gray. So we know the biological seats of all of these things that we do. And we have these particular tools by which to explore them.
Interesting. So you just touched on spirituality. What's the role of spirituality in home?
Oh, yeah. That was asked of me by a psychiatrist, actually, who was using Maslow's, criteria. And I said, you know, DMT or dimethyltryptamine is actually called the spirit molecule. And so, I joke, but it's actually partially true. It's like, so, you know, lack of spirituality is simply a DMT deficiency syndrome. So if you lack spirituality, just take some DMT and you probably get a hit of it. Uh, but yes, as I mentioned earlier, we're seeing the roots of spirituality in our system, right? With the way they are wired evolutionarily. So a lot of these things are actually getting included in the model that we have of health optimization because they are part of how we're wired, right? We're wired either bioevolutionarily, or we're wired socioculturally, and we just have to take a look at where the interface is because it's a continuum, right? But at the interface, we have a lot of trouble. Uh, we have fear-based systems on the one hand and rational systems on the other hand. Fear-based systems are easier. Yeah, you're going to get sick. And rational systems, this is what you do to stay healthy, require more energy. So, and that's why these things, the questions about this, how to include spirituality and so on. We can actually do that on a biological level, or you could do that by one of the things that epigenetics does, and this, is actually it's the link between, for example, mindfulness and meditation and all of that. Actually, they affect the epigenetics, right? And actually gives you a different epigenome that is actually a lot calmer than most individuals. They also show that, of course, there is a decrease in size of the amygdala, which is a fear-based center of the fear center in the brain. So yes,
this is fascinating. I think we should do another probably episode on this. I just want to end with one question. So you advocate for testing, not guessing and measuring everything, yes. But for those who can't, or for some reasons now measure, go into such deep measurement of their biomarkers. What's your advice? What should be doing to maximize health, and what you are doing in your own life for your health?
Yes, I'll tell you. Actually, it's summarized in a few words, and I'm known for doing this. For saying that 60 to 80% of health, it's not due to supplementation or things like that, but it's due to our lifestyle. So the first one I say is sleep well, right? Make sure you get 6 to 7.5 hours of sleep because the average sleep cycle is around 90 minutes. And then when you wake up in the morning, I say breathe well. By breathe well, I mean you meditate, right? And also the other side of that is have some air purifiers in your home if it's polluted where you are, right? And then next thing that you do is you sun well. You expose yourself in the sunlight, right? At noon and in summertime, 10 to 12 minutes, without a hat on, of just your face and hands, it's equivalent to a free 40,000 IU of vitamin D. You can't beat that. And then the thing is, you can also, while sunning yourself, you can ground well, right? You could take off your shoes, step on the ground, like where grass is or where the sand is, or me, since I live in the city, I don't have sand or grass. I have a grounding mat to ground myself. Take off those electrons from my body, and then you have to hydrate well, right? The first thing I do when I go to the kitchen is actually I drink 2 glasses of water after I wake up because the body is actually dehydrated, right? And then the other thing is you eat well, right? You that's a separate thing altogether, but I usually have an eating window of just 8 hours. I eat at 12 noon, which is my fattiest meal, and then my carbiest meal, which is highest fiber, is around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and my dinner finishes at exactly 8 p.m. And it's highly proteinaceous. And don't sleep within 3 hours of your eating because the stomach empties within 3 hours. Many of our clients or questions that arise will be, they have a stomach acid coming up of their throats, and that's because they're lying down too soon, right? and then relate well, right? If you have a toxic environment, it's just not just your relationships with people, but your relationships with things, and your relationship with your career, with your house, not just with your spouse, right? And with other people. Make sure that they're not toxic, right? And there's and then the last thing is I say is love well, right? The love that you have has to start with you first. And this is what I say about health. It's just like being in an airplane when the oxygen mask comes down. You have to put the oxygen mask on yourself first before you can put it on others. And it's the same thing with love, right? You have to love yourself first. Otherwise, you cannot take care of the people that you love.
Love it, love it. You make me feel well. I think I'm doing almost everything. I'm just very bad with sleep, so I also have I also have some homework to do. Are you applying those principles yourself in your life?
Yes. Oh, yes. That's my schedule. I forgot. One is the other thing is move well, meaning to exercise, right? Um, they say that now they find that any movement just so you can accumulate around 10 to 12,000 steps a day, or the newest count is now 15,000, is good enough. And for me, before, I had a very stringent exercise regimen, but now I'm more fluid, right? Match your flexibility to your chronobiology, like you can lift without injury probably at 3 o'clock in the afternoon or so. Yes, that thing that I told you, those 9 points right there, that's exactly how I live my life. And yes.
So Ted, thank you very much thank you again for being with us.
Yeah, I'm enjoying this.